Welcome to Community Day. Thank you for taking time out of this lovely tropical weather to come talk all things AWS with us. First and foremost, I want to thank all the organizers wearing these very flattering yellow shirts. This great group up here. And I won't go through everybody's names, but two special shout outs. One would be to Margaret, who is absolutely the muscle and brains behind the operation. She's just been phenomenal, so big thank you to Margaret. And secondly, want to give a shout out to Ross Barrich from AWS, who facilitated this whole conference, so we couldn't have done it without him as well. And one more group of thank yous. Just want to talk about our sponsors here. Our diamond sponsors are Ahead, AWS of course, Cloudimize, U-Turn Data Solutions. Our gold sponsors are Morningstar, Rubrik, Asperitas Consulting, Thousand Eyes, Trend Micro, and New Relic. Thank you guys. And our silver sponsors are Cohesive, Onyx, and Dialogue Tech. So be sure to go up to the vendor area and visit all those folks and thank them for their support. All right. So a couple of quick questions. Who was at the first Community Day last year? Anybody? All right, awesome. And so raise your hand if you're new to a Community Day. Oh, that's phenomenal. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. A couple of quick program notes. We've got 3 tracks today. For the beginning, everything will be in here. We'll have lunch behind you. There'll be a couple of lines there. If you have any questions about the menu or special dietary needs, please talk to the catering staff. We've got, like I said, 3 tracks. Those will be held here in the Scout Lounge and in the classroom. As far as restrooms, we're an inclusive event, so please free to use whichever restroom is most comfortable for you. We also have pronoun stickers available. If you'd like to use those, please see out in front there. I also want to talk a little bit about the unconference. How many people have been to an unconference before? Anyone? Great, I knew you had. All right, so basically it's sort of a spur-of-the-moment conference. You come up with the ideas on the fly, so that'll be held upstairs in the expo area. So if you're interested in presenting an idea or have a topic that you want to explore a little bit further, please sign up on the giant Post-it note. So a couple things. Can everyone pull out their phone and go to the Twitterverse? All right, so our Twitter handle is AWS Midwest. It'd be great if you could give us a follow, then next year and post-event we can communicate with you a little bit more easily. And we're really very inventive on this, so our hashtag for today is going to be AWS Midwest. So if you could please, throughout the day, if you learn anything, post that out there and give us a tag and a hashtag. And then before I introduce Calvin, would you guys like to hear a really bad AWS joke? All right. So tonight, you're probably gonna have all these great options for dinner and these fabulous menus, and you're not gonna know what to decide on. But do you know what you should order? The lamb, duh. I told you it was bad. All right, so let me introduce Calvin. Calvin is the co-founder and CTO of 6 Feet Up, which is a Python web application development company established in 1999. At 6 Feet Up, Calvin establishes the company's technical vision and leads all aspects of the company's technology development. He provides the strategic vision for enhancing the offerings of the company and infrastructure and works with the team to set company priorities and implement processes that will help improve product and service development. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Calvin to the stage.
My goodness, she makes me sound so important. All right, before we get started, I do want to do one little thing here, is I want to grab a picture of everybody. Everyone do your hair, make sure you're looking good. We're gonna grab it's a 360, so no matter where you're at, as long as you can see me, I can see you. Say cheese. All right, awesome. Cool. Well, I'm super excited to be here today. This is actually also my very first AWS Midwest Community Day. I didn't get to make last year's, even though our company helped, and the group I run down in Indianapolis helped put it on. So I'm super excited to be actually today at an actual community day. So kicking it off, wanted to give a talk more about how you guys can take advantage of where you're sitting right now. So talking about building our cloud the community way, or the DaVinci way, actually. And so first off, hey, I'm Calvin. I am, as I said, CTO and co-founder of 6 Feet Up. We do help tech teams and rapidly growing orgs gain momentum through Python app dev and leveraging AWS. But more importantly, I run the Indianapolis local IndyAWS group and the Indianapolis Python group. So if you love talking about Python and you love talking about AWS, I'm definitely the guy who wants to be hanging out with you guys, talking about those kinds of things. And speaking of that, I want to make sure everyone in the room also knows each other, and I make sure I don't kick over my water. First thing we're going to do, there'll be a little bit of audience participation in this, so to get everyone kind of woke up and ready for the rest of the day. I would like you guys just to quickly, turn your left, turn your right, and say hello to hopefully a person you don't know. Maybe it is a coworker you do know, but I want you guys to say hello to each other real quick. Oh, perfect. I love going forward and backward, left and right. You guys thinking way out of the box. This is perfect. Very, very perfect. Great. So I hope you guys, as you see me throughout the day, come up and say hello to me as well. I think that one of the big benefits of being here in the room with everyone today is the fact we can actually say hello in person to each other. So the next thing kind of to get off on the right foot, things are moving fast. I mean, can you believe we have autonomous robotic RC cars that you can just go on Amazon and order? And well, I wish you could have them next day to you, but they're a little bit back ordered right now. But let's dive in. This all couldn't have happened without some other things in the background. So an interesting story. I live next to an older retired couple in Indiana. And I was walking down the driveway, and my neighbor was walking down the driveway to get his mail. He's an 80-year-old guy, retired from RCA, Thomson Electronics. But I've learned over the years, we've lived there a few years now, that he is like super, super into engineering and technology. And he ran an engineering group actually at Thomson RCA. And he told me this story. And it just kind of blew my mind. And I figured I'd like to share it with you guys because I think it kind of sets the stage for where we're going and what we're doing. Do you guys realize, and that thing that's up on the screen, that is the first transistor ever. It was invented in 1947 at Bell Labs, Lucent Labs. You could hold it in your hand. I can't imagine what the cost of this thing must have been, and this was revolutionary at the time, correct? It's actually a guy, Simon Winchester, on an NPR story, told about this story of the first transistor in 1947. But do you guys realize that today, in 2019, there are more transistors on the planet than there are leaves on trees? This is nuts. It's kind of like this mind-blowing thing, right? So that there's more transistors out there, and the modern transistor is smaller than a wavelength of light. You can't see it. You have to stack a bunch of them together before you even see it, and typically they end up looking something like this by the time you get them. My laptop has a quad-core i7 with about 2.1 billion transistors in it. My iPad in my bag has this A12X Bionic processor in it. That has 10 billion transistors in that one package. And that's obviously, you can't see my fingers, but it's really small. But that A12X Bionic, 10 million transistors. So combined, I'm walking around with about 20 plus billion transistors on my person on any given day. It's just nuts, how things are rolling like that. So going back again in kind of history, this is where we're going to come into a little more audience participation again. What was your guys' first computer? Actually, if you want to, real quick, take another minute here. I want you guys to share real quick. This is something we do typically at our IndyAWS meetings and our IndyPy meetings, is I kind of like to ask questions of the crowd to get them to talk to each other. Because later in the day, you'll be at lunch, you'll be like, oh man, that guy had a trash 80. I totally want to go talk to him. So I want you guys to quickly share again, like you did with the hellos, what your first computer was to the person next to you. And then I'll share mine. I'll give you a hint that it's on the screen. I can see this can go on a long time. I may have to actually rein this one back in. So who in the room did have a TRS-80 as their first computer? Oh, nice. We do have some hands with TRS-80s. Nice. Who in the room? I'm going to tell you a story of two computers. My very first computer was a Texas Instruments TI-99 4A. Who else had one of those? Oh yeah. So, but that was an interesting computer. I even had the tape drive for it on the side, so you could record your programs, and then you would load them back into memory by hitting play and typing load on the screen, and it would actually load from the audio tape. Kind of sounded reminiscent of like a modem going off. But the more interesting computer, probably the one that got me like super excited about being into computing and doing what we do today, was a friend of the family had given us a computer he had retired. It was an Intel 8088, so a PCXT processor. Guess how many transistors that processor had? That was 79 when that came out. So remember, 47, one transistor fit in your hand. So 79, that computer had 29,000 transistors in it. I mean, mind-blowing, right? 27,000 transistors in a package about that big. Now, that wasn't good enough for me as a kid. This must have been like 1983. I'll give away my age a little bit there, but I was probably like 9 or 10 years old. Friend of the family was an electrical engineer. He loved geeking out on this stuff, and I was like, man, can we get this thing to go faster? Because guess what the speed of that processor was? 4.77 megahertz. Like we had to put it down to the hundredths of a megahertz because it was that important. We upgraded that computer. Like I guess I was a modder before my time. We took that computer and we actually put in this chip you see on the screen here, the NEC V20. So this came out in 1982, 83. This was a 10 megahertz computer, more than double the speed of that 8088. And it had 63,000 transistors in it. I didn't know this till yesterday because I started going on a rabbit hole deep dive of how many transistors are in all the CPUs of all the world, and it was pretty cool. But to get that to work, you couldn't just flip something in the BIOS. That just didn't exist at that point in time. You literally had to unsolder a crystal from the motherboard and then get the crystal that had the correct frequency to run the rest of the system at the same frequency as the processor and solder that onto the board to make this whole thing work. I mean, if that wasn't hacking, I don't know what it was. At 10 years old, I really don't think I fully realized the gravity of the situation, what I was doing, that we had this like 10 megahertz processor now, and the thing blazed. I could play Rogue, like NetHack, like nobody's business. I mean, the Hercules graphics were screaming on that thing at that point in time. So this kind of brings us to like the speed of innovation, right? Like we've come a long way since the 63,000 transistors in that NEC V20 processor. We are now at this point of, obviously cloud computing. We're all sitting here in this room today because of cloud computing. Now, who has an Alexa in their home? Everyone who's got an Alexa, raise their hand. At least one, right? Who's got two? Keep your hand up. Who's got three? 4, 5, 6, 7 if I count my car. Oh, okay, right, we're back in. So who's got the Garmin Speak Plus? Yep, nice. So I've gone so far as like, I want Alexa in my car because I tell you what, Siri sucks. She's terrible, like she can't understand me, I don't get it, and I'm not trying to be a big advertisement for Alexa up here, but I feel like the speed of innovation there has gone crazy. Like the thing works, like the story I would love to relay to you is that, I have an amazing neighbor who's 80 years old and loves to tell me stories of transistors. But I also have a wonderful, very beautiful mother-in-law from France. And one day we're at the house, and my 10-year-old walks by, and she tells Alexa to do something. She's like, Alexa, turn on the radio to play some music or whatever. And my mother-in-law looks at me, actually looks at my wife. She didn't look at me, she was looking at my wife. She's like, how dare he talk to Alexa like that? And why is Alexa a female? And she starts getting upset, because of the way my son was ordering Alexa to do something. And my mind just all of a sudden kind of got blown. I was like, what is going on? Why is she so concerned? I don't think she kind of makes this separation. I don't know if this is true or not, but she thinks there's a person back there, but it's just a box. And it's just Alexa, it's just a name. And it stands for the Library of Alexandria. My brain didn't make a connection to a human being doing the order taking, but man did hers. And she called my son a little jerk. I was like, this is crazy. She got seriously upset. So around the house, we kind of have to be a little more sensitive when she's around, when we talk to our lady in the tube, because I don't want to cause a rift in the family. And this innovation thing, just as not all brains are keeping track at the same rate with the innovation of the rest of us. Which is also interesting, because now you have Alexa for Business, right? You can have C-level sitting at their desk and getting KPIs, asking the lady in your tube on your desk to give you what's the status of our data center, and what are the numbers trending up or trending down, and she can go off and run her things in the cloud, and bam, they all come back, and you've got that information just right at your fingertips, which is pretty darn amazing right now. But this is all enabled by a couple different factors, right? We've got speed of connectivity. If you look at the ability for people to be connected at all times, the mobile phone user penetration worldwide is expected to reach 64%, globally in 2019. And you look now at things like desktop internet usage is actually falling and mobile internet usage is rising. You're going to have people who are just kind of always on, always around, always connected into our various applications, into our various clouds. They're going to have certain kinds of expectations. And then consumers are downloading more and more apps. They're having higher expectations for their user experience as they are interacting with the cloud and your applications. And so for example, consumers downloaded 178 billion apps in 2017, and that number is obviously climbing. And this is enabled by the speed of data transfer. The rollout of 5G is happening now. Actually, luckily, Indianapolis is one of the cities where that's actually going on. We're getting multi-gigabit LTE speed. And that didn't hit home until I was actually traveling, and a friend of mine said, oh yeah, we've got gigabit to the house right now. I think I still have 20 megabit internet, and I feel like I'm the slowpoke on the block now. I'm like, what do you do with gigabit speed at the house? He's like, He's like, I open up my Spotify, I put a playlist with 500 songs on it, I click offline, and in 30 seconds, that whole playlist is on my phone, instantly. I was like, okay, I may need to catch that back up, because that was enough for me to think that was worth doing. But we're going to be receiving this kind of speed anywhere we're at, not just in our home. At reInvent last year, Amazon announced the new C5N instance type that gives us the transfer speed of 100 gigabits per second to an instance. This makes it a reality to shift giant sets of data in and out of our data warehouses and actually answer questions that we couldn't get answers to before, because it was just, by the time we got the data moved to the right place and had the processing done on the data, the question probably wasn't even relevant anymore. So how do we address this level of speed and ability for us to get work done and get questions answered? And this is where kind of the speed of adoption, and when I talk about adoption, we're talking about this, not just the mobile apps and all the kind of mobile computing pieces of this, but we're looking at things like serverless and containers, the adoption of these building blocks in Amazon and all the other various cloud providers are giving us a new experience from a developer standpoint. So I guess maybe I need to make a confession that I'm probably a developer first and more of an operations and DevOps person second. But that's a wonderful place to be at right now. The technologies that we have available to us, the ability to not have to worry about how do I do Linux administration and make sure my boxes stay patched, and kind of all those benefits they tout of the cloud, make a big difference for a developer who just wants to get something done. I want to write code, I want to deploy code, I want the code to run, and I don't want to worry about all the infrastructure and the scaling and the plumbing that makes this all happen. So I think that that's all happening right now because we have things like Kubernetes and containers that just make it easy to package up those things. It was a revelation I kind of always been resisting the idea of containers and Docker until someone's like, no, this is just packaging. It's not a virtualization technology. This is not a new way of just running something. It's really a new way of packaging something up so it's easy to run anywhere. And that makes a big difference for developers who don't want to deal with, how do I get Postgres installed, and how do I get Redis installed, and how do I get all these things to talk to each other, and how do I do the service discovery, and that stuff just kind of melts away into the background as I get to enjoy just writing some straight Python code to actually answer real questions and make a difference to the kind of work we're doing. Another thing I love about the speed of adoption at Amazon, it seems that they've really embraced a lot of open source tools and made them easily available to developers in kind of this scalable fashion. And now they're starting to take those things to the next level, taking the kind of the DynamoDB and now doing like DocumentDB and giving you enhanced versions of these tools. I mean, obviously they're not the open source ones we have kind of known to love, but they follow the same APIs and conventions, so it's easy for us to kind of get up to speed and get going with these kinds of tools. So again, speed of adoption giving us those kind of benefits as a developer. I don't have to worry about infrastructure. There's just building blocks I literally put together. And I feel like that's been said for years and years, but I feel like that's really finally coming true now. So we look at like a day in data. It's kind of crazy. This is from Raconteur in April of 2019. 500 million tweets are sent per day. And the scale of that is kind of ginormous. Anybody use Facebook? There's a small thing called Facebook. 4 petabytes of data is created on Facebook each day. Like some ridiculous number of photos. These actually, the slides are all online, so you can go kind of read into some of these other numbers. But just the sheer amount of data and things that are happening, 294 billion emails are sent. Still not more than the transistors I probably hold in my whole pocket on a normal day, but it is finally getting up there. What does that mean for you guys? And I assume there's a wide variety of different kinds of companies present in the room. But what if I told you that your organization is becoming a software company and you don't know it? Or maybe you do know it and you're finally doing something about it. And so how do we take this to the next level? And for example, we met with a company last week. They're an audiovisual company, so kind of similar to the guys who put all this together. They deal in microphones and large cases and crates of things and giant screens and roll them around and bring in semis. But in the end, they have to build some software to be able to manage that whole workflow, to be able to manage organizing and keeping speakers on track during a day, manage the upload of things like presentations so that all the presenters can just kind of walk up to the podium, go on their way and present. There's not a lot of out-of-the-box software that can do that, and they also want to make sure that's part of their secret sauce. So I think every company in here needs to kind of take another look at this from that same standpoint of, we're not just an AV company, we're a software company. I mean, if you look at Capital One, they're not just what's in your pocket. They're not just a bank. They have redefined themselves as a software company, and actually have done a lot of their work in the open source. They have built some really cool tools, some of them even for Amazon, like the Cloud Custodian tool, that allow you to enable strict adherence to compliance, cost savings, those kinds of things. And they've done it not as a bank, but as a software company. And that's where I think a lot of companies in this room need to look at the fact that they're becoming software companies. But to become a software company in these day and age, you're going to have to run your cloud infrastructure and run your infrastructure in the cloud typically. Who has kids with Legos? How many of you guys have walked on a Lego? Woo! So there's going to be some pain in going to the cloud and becoming a software company versus just some kind of a product company or building some kind of widget. There's going to be a lot of need to change and adapt. And how do we find time to learn all these new technologies and infrastructure pieces and best practices and things we need to do? And then, okay, how many of you guys have been burnt by something in the docs said it was supposed to work a certain way, you wrote the code that way, and sure enough, it did not work that way? Huh? Yeah, I'm going to give you guys a little hint, a little tip as one software developer to a new room full of software companies. Software has bugs. All of them do. Every last bit of software has bugs in it. And second tip, the docs are going to lag behind or be incorrect. And I think that's just due to, again, that speed at which the change is all happening around us. It's really, it's great that open source is there, and I leverage it every day of my life. I love the fact that Amazon has open sourced all their documentation, so I can finally go put in those pull requests where I'm like, I hope no one else endures this same pain that I just experienced trying to deploy something and only to realize that the docs were just old, wrong, or incomplete. You know, I think actually I attribute some of this though, and I'm going to blame Amazon on this one. Amazon has set a new bar for expectations on delivery. And I'm not talking AWS. I'm talking about Amazon proper. How many in the room now kind of just expect something to be able to show up second day or same day or within a couple hours? We all kind of now, yes, we've been spoiled though. Like this is changing that rate of innovation, and we're now setting expectations and setting a bar kind of high for, well, I should be able to get that in a couple hours, right? Like we should be able to release, you know, a couple hundred times a day, just like Instagram does, right? That's what we all do, because that's just what Amazon does, right? Like I get something to my front door in a matter of hours. It should just work that way. So again, I blame Amazon for some of this. And other tools too, like things like Slack. I mean, how many companies now have adopted Slack internally for a lot of their, you know, that's a good number. But now messaging is pretty instant. Although Slack is not a new thing. I mean, how many people were from the day of IRC? Okay, same group of people. You didn't always expect an instant response from people, but I think the rest of society has caught up with this whole instant gratification, and now we do expect those kinds of instant responses from people. What we have to do, though, is deal with this thing called a ceiling of complexity. So all growth is going to happen in stages. And when you get to these different levels of stages, you have to basically to attain that level, it comes with a price of complexity. So we're talking about how these things are getting more and more complex. As you get to that top of that ceiling of complexity, the next level is going to actually require you to not work harder, but work smarter, correct? And by working smarter, we're going to have to actually achieve a new state of simplicity. So this is a quote from Dan Sullivan, when you choose your future over your past, you enter a new stage of growth. Like you have to be forward thinking and you have to simplify, because just working harder is not going to enable you to get to that next step. Now that next step is going to be, how do we keep up? Like this is all sounding like it's all kind of coming down and getting super complex and super hard for us all to deal with. I'm not going to be the old man yelling at the cloud. I'm going to figure out, how do we keep up? This is an important topic that we need to all go into together. So we're all in this together, everyone in the room here. Actually, you all are very special people because you showed up today. You chose to be here with us today. And I think you'll understand why that's important as we go through the next bits of how we actually keep up. Keeping up is not a new problem. This is just the latest stage, of keeping up right now. Man has dealt with periods of rapid change in the past, so for example, such as things like the Renaissance. So if we think about the Renaissance, this kind of getting back into our man Da Vinci, we need to go back and see how a wise man would have handled this problem. So Da Vinci was obviously from the era of the Renaissance, and he was what we call a polymath. So a polymath is a person who just studies all the things and seems to be just infinitely knowledgeable. Few people can kind of call themselves a true polymath. This is definitely one of those people. So in 2012, there was a historian, Toby Lester, who wrote a book called Da Vinci's Ghost, and he found in one of Da Vinci's journals, I recently saw this article about last year, translated one of Da Vinci's to-do lists. And it was fascinating. Who's seen this article about Da Vinci's to-do list? This is perfect, because this is a great way for you guys to get introduced to maybe a new way of thinking that's going to help you, maybe bust through that ceiling of complexity. Is that Da Vinci was an innovator of his time. But we'll talk about how maybe he got there. So for example, in his to-do list, he had, I don't know, maybe about 20, 25 items on that to-do list. I'm only going to go over a few of them, because if I went over all of them, we'd be here all day, but that's not what we're here for. So he would get the master of arithmetic to show him how to square a triangle. He would, that was like, you just had this journal. He actually carried the journal on his belt at all times, so that at any point in time of the day, he would just write down stuff that he had to do or things that just kind of popped into his head. One of them that was on the list was like draw a Milan. Seems ambitious, but you go for it. But one of the interesting ones I liked was this, go get the master of arithmetic. Go find the actual expert, the person who's going to tell me how something's supposed to work. Go get Messer Fiazzo, who was a professor of medicine and law at Pavia, to show him about proportion. So go find the meds professor to teach you about proportion on the body. You've seen his drawings. Da Vinci did lots of drawings of the human body, but he didn't just invent that himself. He went and found someone who could explain the kind of what's behind proportion of a human body. And things like go find a master of hydraulics and get him to show you how to repair a lock, a canal, and a mill in the Lombard manner. And this one seemed really specific. Like he already kind of knew there was a specific way to repair a lock and a canal and a mill, but he's like, I'm going to go find that master of hydraulics. I'm going to get him to tell me how this is all done. And then I don't know what he's going to do with that kind of knowledge. I mean, he's just one guy. I don't think he's going to go repair those locks, but sure enough, he wanted to know how to do that. And one of the last ones I want to cover here is the Ask Maestro Giovanni Francesi about the measurement of the sun promised to me by, well, actually, he was going to go ask him about something he was promised to him. He's actually holding this guy accountable. He'd talked to him at some point in time about measuring the sun and never got back to him. So I think you need to take these some examples of how you can seek out that knowledge, but then also make sure you go follow back up when you haven't gotten the knowledge that just fully satisfied your need for what that next step was supposed to be. So how does that affect all of us here today? Like you guys are standing in a room with all of the people, there's lots of experts, you got a whole lineup of great speakers today. There are other people in the room who have knowledge that you don't have, that you could seek out very easily because we're all standing in a pretty darn amazing place together. You can literally walk up to the next person and ask them questions, and hopefully some of those things that you talked about earlier, first computers, has kind of helped start a connection with some of those people who are in the room. One of my very first conferences that I ever went to, it was in New Orleans. It was the Plone Conference. Now, I know that may not be a common word for some folks in the room, but basically it's a Python-based content management system. And this happened in 2003. I had just moved back to Indiana from Silicon Valley. We just started our company a few years prior, and we were using this technology to deliver websites for our customers. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the first Plone Conference was going to be in October. Why don't we go? We don't know anybody. I know nobody in this community. We just loaded up a car, literally my brother and I, who had helped found the company, loaded up a car, drove to New Orleans, and sat in a room with 150 other amazing people who basically did the exact same thing. They're like, oh, let's all just meet at this one spot. And now I'm sitting in a room, literally with the people who wrote the open source software and all the libraries that are underneath that open source software that basically pay my bills. We're a consulting company. We deploy software for folks. And now I can, well, at the time I didn't know this was really possible. I could ask them anything I wanted, but I was a little timid because like these guys seem really big to me, like that these are kind of these otherworldly beings who developed this amazing open source software, only to find out after like 5 minutes of being in the same room with them that these are all normal people. They all put their pants on one leg at a time, just like I do. It's crazy. And you can walk up to them and ask them all kinds of crazy questions. Now, when you do ask them questions, they will give you answers as if you understand every word they're saying. So you may have to ask some follow-ups to kind of drill down a little deeper, but they are happy, more than happy to talk to you. I've yet to run into a conference where there are people who like didn't want to like, they want to kind of give up here, get their talk done and kind of go their way. Every one of these speakers I've ever run into has been super excited to kind of do the follow-up questions afterwards in the hallway, come find me at lunch. They aren't just saying that, they really do mean it. Come and talk to those people. That is why we come to these conferences and events, is so that I can be in the same room with these people. I followed this up with my second conference, which was the second ever PyCon. So anybody doing Python in the room? PyCon is a community conference. It started back in 2003. So the 2004 conference was the second one. There were 250 people at the conference. There was a Zope track. Now, those of you who do Python probably don't even know what that is. Not a big deal, that things have changed. PyCon doubled every year, almost. And now, last year, PyCon was almost 4,000 people in Cleveland, Ohio. And this is still the community-run version of the conference. This is not a big enterprise kind of corporate commercial software type thing. This is strictly run by the community, but it is an amazing experience because you now have 9, 10 tracks, open spaces board that is as big as this screen and gets filled every day with people who want to talk to you and who want to share their experience and share their knowledge. Actually, the conference stories keep getting better. One of them ended me up in an Austrian castle in 2005 with a prince, an actual Austrian prince, sprinting on code with the creators of Zope itself. And like, again, some of that is realizing there's an opportunity and seizing that opportunity. There are things that happen to you every day. You may sit next to somebody, and if you don't say hello to them, you may never know that they were the creator of something interesting that you are interested in as well. You may never know that they could actually help extend your knowledge in some other way, unless you make that attempt to say hello to somebody. I mean, how many times have you sat on an airplane next to somebody and just been like, I hope no one says anything to me. I don't feel like talking to anybody today. But you know what? If you just change that mindset just slightly and actually do talk to them, you never know what can happen. You never know, you may end up in an Austrian castle in 2005 sprinting with a prince. These things just kind of can happen. And how does this all happen? This all happens together, right? We're all together here in this as a team. I do want to give a big shout out to the organizers here. So Margaret, I don't know where she went, but thank you for putting all this on. This is amazing. I want to thank the AWS community. So even though Amazon Web Services is a giant enterprise, big commercial entity, I feel like they do treat the community really well. And they do have their evangelists who do show up at our meetups. So running the Indianapolis Amazon Web Services user group, we have had numerous Amazon evangelists come and of their own dime, well, Amazon's dime probably, come and speak at our events. So I want to give a huge shout out to Randall for coming and doing that. I want to thank Ross. Where's Ross at? How can you miss him? Super tall. I can't see anything anyway. But if you see Ross today, thank him for enabling communities like ours to exist, like the Indianapolis user group, and all the other Midwest groups that are here. And you've got couple groups here in Chicago, you have Milwaukee and Columbus, and you've got Cleveland, and all these groups, St. Louis, and I think that keeps expanding and expanding. I see there's a huge list down, it's kind of unfortunate it's down at the very bottom of the sign, but there's a list of all the names of the organizers down here. I mean, maybe try and make it a task to go around and find every person in a yellow shirt and thank them for doing the things that they're doing, because they're helping bring us all together in a more regular basis than just kind of once a year at a community day, or once a year at a reInvent, or once a year at a summit, depending on which ones you can actually get to. So the volunteers here make this as an amazing thing. And I do want to kind of express how amazing running these meetups has been. Running the Indianapolis AWS group has been awesome. I think we are one person away from 700 people in our group, which is pretty fantastic considering we only started what's that? Did we already go? Oh, maybe we already got over the 700, but we just started 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. It's been one of our fastest growing groups ever. The Indianapolis Python group that I run is now almost 1,700 people, and we get between 60 and 80 people every meeting, every month, and now we're doing 2 meetings a month. So if I'm passionate about anything and I want to be able to share with you guys is the fact I love building and helping to build communities and helping you guys do this journey. So it is a journey, and we are all in it together. I want to make sure we do that. So Leonardo did not innovate on his own or in a vacuum. He went out and asked tons of people to figure out how all these things worked so he could basically expand his knowledge and help us all through society. I do want to leave with the one last quote here. So I found out last night this might not be Latin. This may be old Italian. But if anyone speaks Old Italian in the room, forgive me if I butcher it. But dimi, 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 which if you're familiar with Latin-based languages, that is tell me, tell me, tell me. Tell me whether, tell me how things are, tell me if there ever was. That was kind of Da Vinci's quote that he'd written in his doodles, in his journals often was, tell me, tell me, tell me. And I want you all to keep on dreaming and keep your heads in the clouds, because I want you to use today's exercise, being here at the AWS Community Summit, as a way for you to get to that next stage and that next level of curiosity. We have experts here, and they cannot wait to talk to you. And I can't wait to talk to you all either. So if you want, you can ask me anything. Thank you all very much.